Hello and welcome to Regenerative Farmers America. I am so excited today. Jesse is here with us from White Buffalo Land Trust, personal hero and world regenerator. So I'm so excited to have you today.
Thanks so much for having me, Lauren, and glad to be part of the conversation.
Thank you. Just jump right in and tell us, how did you get started on this journey and with White Buffalo, and tell us a little bit about this amazing project.
Yeah, thanks. So, I think like many of us, our paths by which we take are sometimes nonlinear, and the story holds true for me. My background, I was born and raised here in central coastal California, and grew up with a love of nature and in the great outdoors. But when I went off to school and college, really fell into this love of art and design, and so my educational background really comes from one of visual communication design and product design and industrial design. And I found kind of a great overlap with my kind of love of design and the design process and my love of food and nature in agricultural systems. And so starting to really kind of lean into ag system design and landscape design and designing food systems was where I kind of came to this work from. But once you kind of get your hands in the soil and your feet on the ground, and you definitely want to spend less and less time behind a computer and more time out in the field. And so through a family farm that we started in 2012, managing kind of tree systems, avocados, apples, persimmons, and animal systems of pigs and chickens and turkeys, to intensive market gardens and mushrooms and microgreens. It really was a crash course through and through for the better part of kind of a half decade, and then opportunity really presented itself in our community to deepen our relationship with the work of regenerating landscapes, communities, and White Buffalo Land Trust was the kind of outgrowth of a relationship between myself and our founder, Steve Finkel, and I've been helping grow this organization and our work since day one.
I love that. It's kind of always interesting when the artists come to, the permaculture kind of regenerative background. We think of a lot of just converted farmers. That's such a neat background to bring to it.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about Jamala Canyon. Hopefully I said that right. Tell me a little bit about that project. It's so unique, and you guys have created such an amazing space. How did that come about, and kind of what are your just favorite things, or what is the magic to you about that?
Yeah, so Jamala Canyon Ranch, JALAMA, is a 1,000-acre ranch about 8 to 10 miles from the pinnacle of California, right at that elbow point conception. And so we have a really unique opportunity to be at the kind of the turning point of Northern California and Southern California. We're neighbors on that 1,000 acres to the Nature Conservancy's Dangermond Preserve, and just north and south we have Vandenberg Air Force Base and Hollister Ranch. And for those who don't know those places, it's really kind of a ranching community, a conservation community, and kind of a private military community. And on the other side of us, it's a multitude of different kind of cattle ranches. And so we find ourselves working on that property at the nexus of many different communities, but also in service of the many different needs and questions that those communities bring to the story of land stewardship. So Jamala Canyon Ranch is where our Center for Regenerative Agriculture really resides and grows from, where we are able to really put into practice our field of focus at White Buffalo Land Trust. And we're really able to demonstrate where kind of the principles of regenerative agriculture ground themselves in a unique context of people, place, and time. So the property is very diverse topographically. We have kind of different ecological sites and a range of different elevations. What we really don't have is flat ground, to be honest. But we have some beautiful kind of annual dominated rangelands that we're seeking to really bring back these native perennial grasses. We have kind of flowing coastal sage scrub, amazing habitat for birds and butterflies and animals of all types, kind of dappled oak woodlands and oak savannas, different species, including the coast live oak and the tan bark oak, and some new ones we're finding each day. And then we also have a great representation of riparian corridors that flow through the San Ynez watershed, and really kind of being able to play in this kind of moist stream bed, intermittent stream bed, with different willows and elderberries and sages. And then the managed agroforestry is also alive and functioning through the lens of vineyards and a small olive orchard. So the property itself kind of represents those 5 different ecotypes, the ecological sites, I should say, that have unique vegetation and animal communities that are represented not only in our property, but around Santa Barbara County and California and Mediterranean regions around the world. So once again, the grasslands, the oak woodlands, the riparian, the sagebrush, and the managed agroforestry. And through that lens, we're really able to ask this question, what is unique about those different ecological sites and how they are represented on the property, and how can we identify what needs to be regenerated within them? What different ecological processes are functioning, and how can we increase their ability to function at a higher level? And through that line of questioning comes, hypotheses around, okay, well, maybe this intervention, maybe this enterprise, maybe this action or activity is going to be the thing that really helps it improve, year after year, decade after decade, however the timeline may proceed. But that's really what the work is, right? It's listening and learning. It's then, making hypothesis and taking action, and then deploying, monitoring and observation and research and data collection in service of more information to ground yourself in, more knowledge so that you can go and put it into practice and gain some more understanding. And so that reciprocal cycle of learn and share and do is really what is happening out there through our land stewardship, through our research and monitoring, and then ultimately through our education and training programs. And through that lens, we get to engage with the broader community to raise the ecological literacy of food service professionals and teachers and educators of all sorts, to policy officials and healthcare providers, to students of all ages, and we want people to reconnect not only to the soil and to the water and to the wildlife, but also to themselves as part of this living whole system, not as nature as other, but as a living whole that we are a key role player in, and letting people get grounded in that line of questioning. What is my role in this? How can I contribute? Whether it's the dish I decide to serve, the way I decide to teach, the policy I decide to write. Like all of these things, we all have a responsibility around, and they all have implications on the living ecosystem around us. And then the training part is really around, farmers and ranchers. We want to provide resources. We want to provide a forum for peer-to-peer learning, but also deep discussion around kind of the technical know-how of putting things into practice, whether it be a transition to no-till agriculture or holistic managed grazing, or managing your own nutrient cycling and composting systems on site better, better farm design and planning. These are all these like really big themes and these big shifts sometimes for people. And so we knew we needed a forum with thought leaders and practitioners, and really a framework of approach for how people can make transitions or move the needle forward. So that's kind of like a high level look at the Jamala Canyon Ranch and kind of what we're doing there. And then, that layered on obviously with our organization and kind of the structure of our fields of focus through land stewardship and education and training and our research and monitoring, which ultimately kind of rolls up into enterprise, into products. We want to create things that people have an opportunity to actually make a choice around, to put clothing on their backs or food in their bellies, and have it make a difference in the broader community and the landscape. And so we believe that our fields of focus all kind of roll up into that, into to products and enterprises and offerings, so that we can build customers instead of consumers. We can build customs around and culture around what we kind of put within our homes and around our family. So yeah, I'll leave it at that for now.
I love it. And I keep thinking of all the different areas that you've got to have on that farm, right? Like there's got to be so many different amazing, unique ecosystems. Kind of give us a little more like tangibility about like what animals are rotating through where, what are kind of the projects that you're working on to have that discussion with nature about returning it? What are the boots on the ground projects that you're most excited about?
Yeah, for sure. I've got two daughters. I've got a 8-year-old, almost 9-year-old, and I've got a 7-month-old. And I love to look at the property through their eyes, and especially my 9-year-old right now. It seems like every day when we kind of, or not every day, but every day that we are able to go out together to actually explore the land, she goes, "Dad, I haven't been here before." And I'm like, "Isn't that amazing? Like, there's so many little nooks and crannies." And I think sometimes we forget, whether it's the small backyard, a 1-acre, a farm, a ranch. Like if you look through a child's eyes, there's always another kind of like smaller nested hole. There's always a little place for a fairy garden, or a little kind of like a patch of grass to really go and wonder just about wildflowers. And so I think that I love that approach. Bring the child's mind to the work, and for us, that really just kind of means that there's an unfolding once again of these different projects that have kind of a purpose and a set of principles about them that fall into practice the more in relationship you get with the land base. Some of the ones that we're really excited about are kind of in tandem with our livestock. We run a grass-fed beef finishing operation in partnership with Richard's Regenerative. It's a grass-fed beef company based out of Northern California, really focused on bringing land-to-market beef into the marketplace. And so we are a site for finishing cattle with them. We also raise boar goats. It's a meat goat, well adapted to this region, and well adapted to some of the coastal state scrub and hardier vegetation and terrain on the property. But to that end, we do need a greater ability to manage livestock in relation to the diverse topography and vegetative communities on the property. So some of the projects we're working on right now are focused on fencing design and expansion, exclusion zones around sensitive habitat. And that's not to say we will not provide access to that habitat from livestock, but right now we don't have the ability to differentiate between, say, a south-facing pasture, a riparian zone, and a north-facing woodland. And those all have different needs, and they all have different recovery periods, and they would have different approaches by which you would want to deploy animal impact as a tool. And so we're in the process of establishing some hard permanent fencing, some temporary electric fencing around the property, just to give ourselves that flexibility within the context of holistic managed grazing or multi-paddock rotational grazing, to be able to kind of differentiate between our management units. Instead of these large pastures, we have a little bit more nuance in our approach. But that also offers us, as we kind of provide these exclusion zones, to take other actions, such as tree shrub establishments in some of the upper reaches of our riparian zone. So we're currently deploying I think 154 potted plants funded through the NRCS Environmental Quality Incentives Program in one of the North Creek watersheds to bring some increased biodiversity, some taller native tree species for bird habitat, some more kind of shrub and grasses for more pollinator and bird habitat and forage and fodder for livestock into the future. But this is one of those things where we want to be a center for biodiversity to thrive and to spread. And we know that part of that is creating the niches for native ecosystems that are great kind of resilience factors, to also have respite, to have these safe havens where people are actively trying to increase their function and diversity. So, a host of different native plant species are all going to be able to be planted because of the fact we now have livestock exclusion fencing. We actually have the ability to provide browse protection so these can take hold, where historically there has been kind of unfettered access to these upper reaches of riparian zones, and since then have depleted their kind of riparian buffers and tree canopy covers and so on and so forth. And in that same program, we're also being able to deploy kind of a similar tactic, but a little bit more of a linear regimented approach in a hedgerow around our vineyard, but similar kind of approach to increase biodiversity, pollen availability, and habitat in more of a managed agroforestry or managed kind of vineyard setting.
I love that you guys kind of just jump into the deep end, right? Managing cattle is one thing. Managing goats is a whole different ball game near riparian hedges. So, wow.
Very true. Very true. Very true.
Tell me a little bit about this integration with Richards. So there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen with an organization like yours from top to bottom. How do you kind of stay in the mix, make sure that people are getting their needs met as far as the integration of cattle and, from the nonprofit? How do you, because I think we're all better as communities, right? And we keep saying regenerative ag is about community. In actuality, how does that become well managed?
Well, I think that you're right to kind of bring up the relationship that we have with Richards Regenerative, because of the fact that came out of a kind of a holistic planning process where we're able to state a context in which we are working. And one of those kind of dynamics was that White Buffalo Land Trust as an organization, and me as the director of land stewardship, were very new to Jamala Canyon Ranch as a land base. There's a lot for us to learn. No matter how much due diligence, no matter how much mapping and planning and site visits, whatever field walks, there's no substitute for being there through the seasons, waking up to the different temperatures, watching grass grow, and watching animals interact with it. And so to do that while also feeling well equipped to start your own beef company, to start your own pack and wrap operation, to start managing your own, processing relationships and transport, for us just didn't seem like the highest and best use of our energy at these early stages and early years of our management out at Jamala Canyon Ranch. And also, we live in a context in which we're trying to find more traction and more access to regeneratively grown and regeneratively managed landscapes. And Carrie Richards and her family and team have been doing an amazing job of growing that access, of creating products, whether they be burger patties or hot dogs or steaks or whole animals, so that people throughout their region, our region, have access to these opportunities to bring really grass-fed, finished, holistically managed, ecological outcome verified meat onto their table. So we want to support that. We want to be a part of that. We want to uplift that. We don't want to be in competition. They're colleagues of ours. And so it made a lot of sense for us to build this relationship where we can help them expand their production base, where we can help them move south into different markets. We can help them actually fill a niche within their production cycle. The identification that we actually have, we're both in California, but we all know that Northern California and Southern California are much different kind of ecological contexts. We are in different ecoregions. And so because of that, we also took note of the natural patterns that California offers. During the summer, historically, Southern California has been hot and dry. During the winter, Southern California has had really good green grass. We're cooler and we have some moisture here. But our grass matures a little bit sooner than they do up at their ranch. So we have the opportunity to finish animals a few weeks prior to what their pastures provide. And that's really where they had a deficit of land bases that were able to provide the quality of beef with the story that their market and their customers really were asking for. So we're able to fill a niche for them, but we're also able to meet an ecological need on our property, which means, there's times in which our 1,000 acres at Jamala Canyon Ranch really doesn't want a massive herd of cattle on it. From June until our first rains in fall or winter, there's not a lot of water and there's not a lot of green grass. And so we want that time to recover. We want that time for especially our perennial grasses that are not those one and done annuals. We want our time for those perennial grasses with what moisture is left. We want it to chase it deeper. We don't want them to have another pass of grazing on them and actually end up being overgrazed. And so we're already witnessing such an amazing resurgence of these perennial grasses that we feel are really the lifeblood of a healthy pasture. Just after a year and a half of animal impact when we have moisture and it's cool, and then the removal of animal impact when it's hot and moisture is depleting. And so for us, we can bring in a herd that's large enough to really get the impact and the grazing that we're looking for, but then actually be able to remove them and get the recovery of the desired species of perennial grasses in the rest of the year. And it also frees up our labor from the livestock management of the cattle to focus on the vineyards, to focus on the olives, to focus on the restoration, the fencing building, the education. So it once again met our holistic context in a lot of different ways to build a relationship in a community with Richard's Regenerative and our grass finished beef operation.
I love it. I think that point where we all have those farms that have really like suffering points. And for some people that's winter, some people it's different seasons, to be able to have somewhere else that they go, that makes such sense. So tell me the journey of food of Figure 8. How did that relationship come about? And how did you go from all the amazing work you're doing to being able to create a value add product, which is no small undertaking?
Yeah, so Figure 8 is our food brand. Figure 8 Foods is owned by White Buffalo Land Trust, so it's part of the nonprofit, and it's a mission aligned CPG that we started in order to create a platform to really be outward and forward about the purpose of our work is to bring restorative, rejuvenating foods forward from systems of regenerative agriculture. We wanted to create a platform that lived beyond the boundaries of even the land bases that we were stewards of. We wanted to create a platform that was able to engage with other producers and producer networks and give them a platform to sell through into a customer base that was really looking for that. And so Figure 8 had a flagship project and product that is a organic persimmon vinegar. And this product is one of my favorites. It will always be like this, your first child, the greatest love story. It's the thing that I've been working on for so long. So I'm really proud of it, but I'm also just really excited to see people engaging with it, people like sharing recipes around it, seeing it in people's pantries is just really exciting to me. And the story behind this persimmon vinegar was we used to live on a small 50-acre property that had oaks and orchards and animals, and one of the orchards was this organic persimmon orchard. And we would harvest each year. We would sell through our channels, markets and farmers markets and restaurants. But there's a lot of grading, A grades only, a lot of polishing, perfect flats, and there was a lot of things that fell on the B, C grade things that there was just no market for, and so we had amazing pork, our pigs ate really well, an artisan creamery, avocados, apples, persimmons, acorns, we grew some of the best pigs around, but that's not always the highest and best use for this nutritious and delicious perennial fruit crop, this divine fruit of the gods. And so we were able to once again build this relationship with a company called Ventura Spirits. They're just down in Ventura near Patagonia headquarters, and make some amazing artisanal spirits. And one of them was a persimmon brandy. I mean, they would take our end of the year persimmons, our BC grays or whatever was left on the tree, and made this high quality aged brandy spirit that they back blended, I think like 3-year age, 2-year age, and 1-year age. And on like year 3, one of their owners called me up and said, you know, we left a couple of the persimmons in a bucket and it turned into vinegar. But it's some of the best vinegar I've ever tasted. You got to get down here and get this. And sure enough, it was some of the best vinegar I had ever had. You know, fell into the deep end of research around the cultural history of persimmons throughout Asia, whether it be China or Korea, or Japan. My close first cousin is half Japanese and lives there, and he was just shocked that I hadn't even made persimmon vinegar before. And you know, persimmon leaf tea was a staple in his house. And so I fell in love with the culture around persimmon vinegar and persimmon preservation. And it led to a grant opportunity, once again through the USDA. This was a VAPG grant, a value-added producer grant that supported us in the planning process, the production process, the financial modeling, the marketing planning around creating a value-added product from persimmons through a natural fermentation, shelf-stable product, which was persimmon vinegar. So we did that. Fast forward a few years, that project took to when White Buffalo Land Trust was founded, and I had this project kind of ready to go. And we kickstarted. We started making vinegar, and we found another USDA grant called the LFPP grant, the Local Food Production and Promotion Grant. And that really kind of kickstarted us to a new level of being able to invest in branding and invest in packaging, distribution, production scale up. And through that grant, we were able to go through the process of branding Figure 8 Foods and set ourselves up kind of on this foundation of restorative foods for regenerative agriculture, but also finding foods that were shelf stable, that had natural preservation processes, that didn't require refrigeration. And so that was the foundation for us to kind of launch our second product, which was and is the biltong, which is naturally cured using the persimmon vinegar as well as salt curing and spices. And this is just an air dried, non-cooked beef snack, and has amazing history as a named product of biltong in South Africa, both with the Thon Bushmen as well as the Dutch. And there's crossover in so many cultures of kind of air dried meat. And we found that this was something that could provide a fantastic platform for the work we were doing in kind of regenerative ranching and holistic managed grazing, and the on package mark, which is the land to market seal, and the first regenerative outcome verification standard that's backed by EOV, the Ecological Outcome Verification Protocol. And so we had the opportunity to have this packaged product that could play a role of business card, storyteller, community builder, value provider for our organization. And that's really what we're trying to do with Figure 8 Foods. We're trying to create a platform that can continue to support our nonprofit work going forward. We can invest more in ecosystem function. We can invest more in education opportunities. We can do more research, and we can have our cake and eat it too. We can actually have products out there for people to engage with and people to be able to surround themselves with. So that's kind of the origin story of our first 2 SKUs in the marketplace. Multiple SKUs, obviously, but we're talking vinegar on one side and biltong the other. The biltong has 2 flavors right now, an original spice, original and a spice. I'm a spiceaholic, so the spice is absolutely my favorite. It's usually what gets me through a lunch period on the field.
I love that. And I will, people who have heard me before say, I'm always going to preach it, buy with your dollar, right? Like, so if people want to continue this legacy of like truly unique food that's built from regenerative systems that are not just, we can say regenerative and say we're rotationally grazing something, but ecological verification, biodiversity, regenerative is so much more, right? And so we have the ability to directly support that by purchasing things. So that's my stick. It's always my stick. Vote with your dollar where you want things to continue. So I'll throw one more wrench in that I think what you've done uniquely well is you have blended with so many different things, USDA, nonprofit world, consumers, like you guys are in the middle of so many markets. What would you say to somebody who is maybe a current farmer and they're a little concerned about entering into those arenas? Like the USDA is not necessarily always the leading cutting edge, and sometimes regenerative butts heads, but you've clearly been able to make it work and had some really amazing successes. What's your words of wisdom to those people to take the next step?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I've got a lot of local friends and colleagues and peers and mentors that sometimes I think we're crazy for freaking dealing with some of these government grants, because sometimes they're a burden, sometimes they're restrictive, but they're also an amazing opportunity. These are a lot of these are taxpayer dollars that we need to get back into our communities and reinvest back into our landscape. And so, our organization is doing our best to find avenues in order to demonstrate that it's not impossible to be able to access resources. We live, in a resource abundant, time, and it's just about how we manage and those resource flows to their highest potential. And so I think I would recommend not taking what we did and saying that's how you do it, but instead taking stock of the context in which you're working and identify the priorities of your own entity, whether it be you as an individual, your family, your farm business, and then find where your priorities and your values align with different resource bases and communities. So I'll say this, we are a nonprofit organization, so we do have opportunities for fundraising that for-profit entities do not. That's mostly found on kind of the foundation side of things. There's private foundations, there's family foundations, there's donor advised funds, there's the whole tax world where people need to get tax write-offs for donating, and our nonprofit has an ability to be able to bring those into the public benefit through our work. But so many of the grant opportunities that are focused on agriculture are not designated for nonprofits. They're just designated for farmer and rancher communities. And so the USDA is obviously a big kind of overarching kind of bubble. And so underneath that are different kind of departments. And the NRCS is obviously one that we've found ourselves working quite a bit with through the EQIP program, once again, the Environmental Quality Incentives Program. And they were incredibly helpful. I was just explaining this to a farmer yesterday, where he was asking which grant writer we used or how much time. And I was like, our NRCS director has been so valuable. She walks the land, she asks questions, she wrote the grant, we have the supply information, but she submits, and so there's a lot of support out there from not every region is the same. not every agent is as helpful. But I'll give a shout out to Emma Chow and what she's been able to do in our region, in our community. And then I'll also say that, there's a lot of other programs out there that are being more privately led, like the Kiss the Ground Farmland program that's providing resources to farmers and ranchers around education and resourcing and research data collection on their land. The work that Fibershed is doing in their community. It is really about understanding the communities in which you're working to help you identify where support might be found. And we're just doing it in our context to be able to demonstrate one way.
I love it. And I'll throw you one more twist. For somebody who is not a farmer and somebody who just loves this movement, what would you say is their best way to get involved and be a part of this if they didn't want to farm?
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of back to something I said earlier, which is, one of our kind of directives is to help people find the opportunity to connect themselves, because they are, but like overtly understand what that connection means. And so really look at what your passion is. You know, sometimes your passion is not what you do every day, you know, and that's okay. But if you are doing something that you truly enjoy doing, you know, or you have a job or you have work that you see is impactful, is meaningful, then find what those threads of meaning and impact are. And try to understand the different nodes are for you to, you know, different acupressure, acupuncture points are for you to really kind of send positive work into our ecosystem. You know, if you think about it, you know, if you're in a classroom with a bunch of kids, you have a bunch of young minds. You know, how many of them know how to grow their own food? How many of them know the importance of healthy soil? We can teach math through that lens. We can teach science through that lens. We can teach literature through that lens. Like, you know, it doesn't matter what we're teaching, but teaching it in a context that helps people understand their connection to natural systems. And I could go on and on around, you know, family health care, around policy, around, you know, food service, you know, construction, you know, architecture, you know, all of these things. You know, I feel like, you know, our Caltrans, our, you know, roadside like government work crews could have a huge impact on our ecosystem through water management and like roadside tree buffers and median, you know, planting. Like just that alone, if we just dealt with the buffers and the medians of our roadways as a way of supporting biodiversity corridors, like that could be one of the greatest missions of our time. But not many people would put Caltrans as the stakeholder group that you would be most excited about in regenerating ecosystems, but they are, and that's a priority, to be able to find someone there that can like understand that they have that potential contributive role. So I think that would be my advice, is to recognize the threads of connection and act upon them in a positive manner.
I love that. So everybody, I highly recommend go check out all the amazing work he is doing, from the product to the farm. Get out there, come visit him. And you will also find them on Instagram, putting out tons of beautiful pictures of all the work Jesse is doing. So go check them out. Jesse, I appreciate your words of wisdom so much. It's been fantastic.
Thank you so much, Lauren. I really appreciate the work you're doing, and I'm very grateful for the invitation today.